This is Radio Prague International coming to you from the Czech capital.
Hello, listeners. I'm Amelia Mola-Schmidt, and you're listening to Czechia in 30 Minutes, the program where we give you the top headlines and most important stories in the country. Coming up in today's 30-minute show, art can be uncomfortable. Miroslav Srnka on pushing the boundaries of contemporary music. That's on episode 3 of our podcast, Faces of Czech Music. That's coming up, so do stay with us. Arguably one of the most internationally renowned contemporary Czech composers, Miroslav Srnka has wowed audiences across the globe with his original and innovative operas. In 2016, Srnka debuted his double opera, South Pole, which tells the story of a 20th century Arctic expedition, receiving outstanding reviews. In our third episode of the Faces of Czech Music, we learn more about the elusive man who often feels more comfortable outside his native Czechia than in it, the inspiration behind some of his most recognized works, and how he believes today's art is often softened for the masses.
Welcome to Faces of Czech Music, Radio Prague International and Czech Center's podcast.
As you surely know, 2024 is the year of Czech music, and our podcast would like to remind you that the Czech music doesn't always mean Anthony Dvořák, Leoš Janáček, or Bohuslav Martinů. We want to introduce you to new names and new faces from different genres.
Faces of Czech Music is presented by Amelia Mola-Schmidt
and Petr Dudák. We're back in the studio, and our Czech face today is the most familiar face of the Czech contemporary music scene, Miroslav Srnka. Welcome to the studio, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
You are a famous composer, and your compositions are played around the world. But let me begin with the beginning. Before you decided to write music, you studied musicology, right? And just for fun, or maybe for your personal pleasure, as a 19-year-old student, you wrote a short composition for 2 pianos. Somebody took the piece to Professor Milan Slavický, who read it and made you seriously interested in composition. Is that correct?
That is very correct. Yeah, some small corrections. The piece was quite extensive. It was 40 minutes long.
Was it good?
No.
But Professor Slavický made you sit for the tests at the Academy of Music in Prague.
Yes.
But you failed.
Yes. Yes, I did.
And it made you more determined?
No.
No.
I wanted to drop it.
Convinced?
Because I was like telling him, you see, that's what it is really. Now you see it, and he had this incredible calm in him that I always try to carry with me from those years, and he kind of nodded, and then yeah, okay, so we will see each other in 2 weeks again. It was very...
So that career, you owe it to Professor Slavický,
yes,
right?
Technically, yes. Yes, and I feel it like that, because he was very influential for me in the first years.
And what was it that made a composer out of you? Were your parents at all musically oriented?
No, not at all. So there was no sound of music in our household.
Not at all?
No. My parents are very nice people. During the communist time, they call it the working class. So I'm coming from a completely different background than what I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm. So what was it eventually that led you to this?
Well, I don't know. For me, I always think I did not have a choice somehow. I was drawn to music as a kid. And maybe it was because it was so rare for me to hear it that made it so very special for me. So every time I heard something very special, I remembered it already as a small kid. And then when I was in puberty and so on, so I was raiding the municipal library because that was the only big collection of LPs back then. And CDs. I chose then musicology because I kind of knew it has to be something with music. And I didn't dare to think about something artistic because coming from that completely different background, so it kind of, I always felt that's for other people, that's not for me, you know. So maybe that's why Professor Slavitsky was so important, because he kind of, with his passion, showed me, yes, you can do it as well.
But you had some musical education as a kid.
Yes,
you attended
violin and piano, because I went to the usual music school, and that was a great thing back then, because the music schools were really, really good, and there were many of them, and many kids went. Now this is very much supported, for example, by Magdalena Kožena and so on. So I hope this continues, because that is one of the few assets that we kind of inherited from the communist times.
That's very interesting, because we had a singer, a mezzo-soprano, Bela Adamová, who said a very similar thing, that the Czech system of music education is unique and something she could not find anywhere else in the world.
Yes, it is. It is. I can confirm that that's something that is really working exceptionally good.
Maybe enough of your early times and your family. Let's make a big jump. In 2018, your composition Overheating for Ensemble had the world premiere in Los Angeles. As a program note, you wrote a poem.
I'm standing on the shore under a tall mast. A huge flag sits still above, probably forgotten from some recent celebration. Now and then, a fine movement passes through the flag before leaving it stagnant again. The air all around starts to heat up. The flag changes. It becomes a liquid tide. It becomes a straight flame. It loses its form entirely to the blaze around it. Its final threads frazzle into gusts of burning sparks. LA Phil has its centenary season. Coincidentally, my homeland has a centenary too. We celebrate these things while everything around us keeps overheating. Celebration is a joy of responsibility. The responsibility to ask, do we care more about the flags or the heat?
Do you recognize the poem?
Yes, but I didn't know till today that was a poem.
It can work as a poem.
Say so.
I read it several times, and I think that the key phrase, at least for me, is we celebrate while everything around us keeps overheating. And my first association was climate change. Everything is overheating. Did you have that in mind?
Yes.
Or something else?
Yes. Well, I don't like to go too far specifically in those things. It's my inspiration, and the inspiration needs to go into the music structure. Otherwise, for me, it's too flat, it's too cheap, So and this kind of inspiration, to be able to go to the music structure, cannot be more specific somehow. It's an idea that has to be so flexible that it can translate into music, which, as we know, cannot very much carry verbal semantics. So
exactly, but you are fine if a listener comes to the concert and hears whatever he or she likes, maybe a reference to climate change or to the increasing speed of modern world or whatever. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, look, that is a blessing and a curse that the music cannot say something exactly. So we have to kind of, as composers, to deal with it, and there are several ways how to deal with it. And some of the people go, as I do, the more, let's say, abstract way, and some of the people go far more like explicit, and both is valid, but everyone has to change the way how it works for them. And the contemporary music is something that is not. Some people need to find their way how to listen to it, and in my experience, it always helps for them to give them some idea from the inspiration that is kind of organic and genuine to the piece, because then it leads them for the first listening much easier.
And after the premiere of Overheating, the LA Times wrote, "Overheating is exactly as uncomfortable as it needs to be, with its gusts of roiling and airless sounds. A muted trumpet wallows into the night. A solo cello slides down the scale like a first responder down the station pool. Still, a sense of emerging, of sparks, of sound becoming fertile offers, if not hope, awareness." Are you satisfied when your audience feels a little bit uncomfortable?
I think in today's arts, those words like uncomfortable are actually meant to be positive. You know, because we have all this possible comfortable art, which we see on Netflix, for example, and which is kind of sterilized to be really approachable, not to go too far, not to touch. So we have to push a little bit.
Do you think people are even aware of that kind of sterile space that the art they're consuming is?
People like not to be aware of things. That's a bit unfortunate. There is this German philosopher, Byung-Chul Han, who writes about this kind of designed art we live in, you know, how everything is so polished. And we simply need to go beyond this polishing to find something that can lead us elsewhere.
Eight years ago, the Bayerische Staatsoper in Munich introduced your opera South Pole. It is based on the story of two polar expeditions, one led by Roald Amundsen, the other by Robert Falcon Scott, competing each other to reach the pole. Soon after the first night, we could read, for example, this.
Since the fantastic success of his opera South Pole in Munich, Miroslav Srnka has undoubtedly become the most familiar face of the Czech contemporary music scene.
The performance was directed by Hans Neuenfels, conducted by Kirill Petrenko, and the leading part was sung by Rolando Viazun. That's a star cast indeed. The Czech press celebrated your success and concluded that no Czech composer earned a similar recognition since Bohuslav Martinu.
Da 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 di da di da 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 di 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 da da di di da di di da di di da di da 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 di da da.
Did you enjoy the praise?
I am kind of a shy and timid person, actually, so I have to always kind of prep myself to be the public person, and this this hype after South Pole was of course great, and it kind of made my life that I have and that I can continue. So yes, in that sense, I did enjoy it, of course. In the other sense, I was kind of very much looking forward to come back to my desk and to write music.
For how long did you work on the opera? 3 years?
Yes, approximately. I mean, I wrote in the meantime other pieces, but I mean, from the idea to the end, it was around 3 years.
Did you enjoy working on it?
Yes.
How much did the Australian writer Tom Holloway contribute to the success?
Oh, very much. I mean, Tom is my constant collaborator, and he is someone who has the things that I don't have. This great gift to observe people and to see the small details of big empathy and compassion and all that kind of stuff that are needed very much in librettos or in stage works, let's say. And I'm far more the kind of mathematically thinking person, which is no exception in composition. So this is already which makes this attraction.
How did the two of you got together? Did you look him up or the other way?
That was again another coincidence, because I met an Australian director at my study. Well, that was kind of program. It was called a Gerwood Opera Writing Program that I did in the UK. We worked with this Australian director, and then we needed some text, and he just kind of pulled out a couple of texts of his friends from back in Australia, and one of those texts was Tom. And I read those texts, and that was a very funny thing, because one of the other choices was Andrew Upton, the husband of Kate Blanchett. And I was like, okay, so shall I go for the and I had to be honest to myself and say, no, it's Tom Holloway, because that's exactly what I need.
And it's not a usual opera, South Pole. It's a double opera. Why is that?
Because the whole story went simultaneously, actually. The two guys, Scott and Amundsen, they actually never met. So technically it all went parallel. It was in the time where people could not communicate. There was no mobile phone stuff like that. They did compete without knowing what is happening with the other party, and that's part of the dramaturgy of the opera, which is kind of I would say it's kind of thrilling, this not knowing what happens and will we be the first ones or not.
Mm-hmm. And what drew you to this story specifically? What made you go, okay, I need to make not just a single opera, a double opera about this?
Several things. I mean, there was one very particular moment, actually, when I was at a cottage in Krkonoše, which is a very kind of ridiculously small mountains in Czechia. We were there at a cottage where there was no electricity and nothing, and we woke up one morning and there was just this white plain and nothing else, just snow and snow and snow. And I thought at the first moment, this is like theater, because it's so abstract, it suddenly makes everything kind of clean. And then there was a friend of ours who was reading to our small sons some stories, and he was very fond of those stories from that time when those conquerors were actually trying to be the first ones on South Pole and North Pole, and this is how the idea actually came. I had several other topics that I proposed to Bavarian State Opera, and the intendant back then, Nikolaus Bachler, he had this perfect instinct to see what is the right thing for the stage.
He had a hunch.
Yeah, so
this will work. I looked at the pictures from the production, and I saw singers in polar explorers gear with ski poles. I listened to the singers singing in a Morse code.
Yeah.
And it made me laugh.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
Did you try to make people laugh?
Yeah, of course. Yes, of course. I mean, the whole story turns so tragic at the end, but at the same time, when you read all their diaries and everything. So there was this 19th century positivism, uncontrolled energy in it, which can be quite ridiculous.
Di-di-da, 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 da-da, di-da, hey, da-di, and da, chi-di-da, hey, di-da, 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 no, 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 da, no, 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 di-di, no, 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 da-di-da, no, 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 di-da,
And if you visit a classical concert in Prague, let's say the House of Artists, everything is very traditional. The atmosphere, the setting, the way people are dressed. Why do you think people like that still?
This is a very difficult question to answer, actually, because there is this tradition of concert as we know it, which kind of really developed in the 19th century, and that was, of course, somehow connected with the let's say upper class dressing up and all those things, which we actually do not need anymore. At the same time, people do kind of celebrate special moments when they really prepare themselves. 2 hours of concentration and silence that we hear in a concert, and that the orchestra or the people on the stage need some kind of preparation also from the audience, so it's all about kind of focus. So we could dress up completely differently, but we go there technically to be in a different space for this time. This is a little bit of a curse of Prague, because Prague has those magnificent halls and this magnificent buildings and everything from that time when this was meant to be. And we don't have, hopefully we will have a new Philharmonic building soon. And what you can see in the countries where this already happened, like or cities like Hamburg or Paris, the spaces actually change the attitude of the people. So it's kind of hard to break it when you go to Rudolfinum, because it kind of fits to go there in the Thai, which, by the way, I never do.
For quite some time, you were better known abroad than here in Czechia. You admitted that when you are back at home and work, you enjoy being invisible. Meaning, I assume that few people here know who you are. Are you still invisible when you are in Czechia?
Well, when I go to a concert in Rudolfinum, then probably not. Unfortunately, I would say. Because the thing that I would enjoy mostly is just to go to the concert and not know anyone and just disappear again. But at the same time, there is this plenty of great people who are part of of this music community that I can call my friends also, and that's great to meet them. Sometimes it's hard for me that I cannot divide those two things,
You once said that you feel more self-confident when you speak English or German than Czech.
Sometimes.
Is it just you, or do you think that us Czechs are shy people, maybe suffer from some inferiority complex?
I would say we do, unfortunately. It is very hard to work on something with Czechs and to simply be serious about things. People are not so used that things can be taken really seriously, etc., etc. And that probably is also has its imprint in the language or in the way we speak. And the other thing is that with the time, I do have more exchange about it with people speaking in other languages. So it kind of shifts even in your head. You start to think about it in other languages. Just recently, I gave an interview for Prague Spring Festival because there will be a performance of my piece in this year's Prague Spring Festival, and I answered in Czech, of course, and a friend of mine read it, who knows me since like years, and he said then, well, I can really read between the lines that you don't think some of those things anymore in Czech. And I was like crushed, but at the same time, yeah, well, he was right. So what am I supposed to say?
Well, self-confidence is probably pretty important as a composer. Have you ever had troubles with musicians playing your music, since some of them might be pretty self-assured individuals?
First, self-confidence is important, but at the same time, also this crushing criticism, self-criticism is important, you know, so it's both. It's like you have to be both. You can to kind of stand behind what you do, and composing is such a slow activity. So even when everyone kind of pressures you, you have to stay simply kind of calm for months to finish it. That needs some kind of, but I wouldn't call it self-confidence, but some kind of focus. And at the same time, you must question yourself every day, is that good enough? Because otherwise you do not move on, you know. And now I forgot the question.
No.
How do you get along with
musicians?
My experience is that the better the musicians, which is hard to say, but I mean, the more experienced at least they are, the easier it is to work with them. So you technically can meet people like that kind of give you hard time, but it mostly doesn't come from those you really want to work with.
Before we finish, 2024 is the year of Czech music. Has the heritage of Czech music influenced you as an artist?
That is a question that I get all the time, and I kind of get more and more allergic on that question. So obviously, the word that I like to say is that the Czech music is my mother milk, and I simply cannot get rid of it. And even if I would like to. And I grew up here, and I grew up here kind of in a quite only Czech-speaking community. So all that is, of course, part of my heritage. At the same time, I think nowadays to define ourselves only as part of one nation, let's say, even and this notion of a nation is already something that we actually can question in some ways, is simply too narrow. You know, so it's not enough today. We are part of something that is much bigger and global, and part of the big problems that we have today come probably from the fact that we define ourselves in too narrow ways.
Our guest today was Miroslav Srnka. Thank you for coming in today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Faces of Czech Music is a Radio Prague International and Czech Center's podcast, presented by Amelia Mola-Schmidt
and Petr Dudek.
Thank you and goodbye.
And that was Czech composer Miroslav Srnka on episode 3 of the Faces of Czech Music podcast. If you're behind on our first 2 episodes, be sure to head to our website to give them a listen. And that was our Czechia in 30 minutes program for today. If you have any comments about today's program, then please send them to us. You can contact us by email at english@radio.cz or on Facebook and Twitter. We'll be glad to hear from you. This is Amelia Mola-Schmidt signing off, saying thank you very much for joining us, and goodbye.